The opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
May the circle be open but unbroken. May the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again. May the circle be open but unbroken. May the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome once again to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, if you believe in reincarnation and you've ever wondered who you might have been in a past life or two, well, you're really going to like this show. My guest is author Della Williamson, and she's retired from the United States Air Force and took her husband and two boys around the world on tour with her, which must have been really cool. She's always been able to see other lives in people, other eras and the places that she was stationed, and the years seemed to overlap. When she realized that not everybody could see into the past as she could, she began sharing her gift with those around her through blocks and repeated patterns by revealing past lives. And by example, we're going to be talking about her book called My Life As, which is Past Lives of an Ordinary Woman. Now, if any of you have any questions or comments, please send them to me in the Para X chat room. And in order to do that, you need to be there. And so come on over to paraxradionetwork.com. Della, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
This is an interesting book, and I really enjoyed reading it. But I always start at the beginning. Let's get a little bit of background so the listeners will get to know you better. Did you deliberately in the beginning try and delve into past lives, or was it just something spontaneous that happened?
Well, I am always able to see who had been and where had been, where places I had gone to. It's like when I was traveling in Europe, it's like, I would see, like the old times. It's like I would see the old times right next to the new times. And there's lots of times that I'd be overseas, and it's like I already felt like I was home, like I had been there before. So after my dear husband died, it's like I started pursuing, okay, why is this happening? If this feels like home, why does it feel like home? Something I had to have been there, or somebody had to have been there and give me feedback, of what that place was like. So I had a dear friend of mine named Scott Orwell who took me on I call it journey, took me on my first past life journey. And it's like he made it so easy. It's like I was able to do it by myself, and I continued to do it by myself. I continued going down what I call the little rabbit hole to the different journeys. And I found all these different lives. It's like, oh, well, that's quite interesting. So I'd start writing them down, so I wouldn't forget. It was like, then sometimes I'd go back and pursue it a little bit more and see, what is that life like? Sometimes I'd get a name, sometimes I wouldn't. And I realized it's like, okay, there's that life. How is that life affecting me now? Mm-hmm. So I would go down into my little journey, and I would find out what is that life like. And of course they all ended in death, like obviously. But was it a good death? Was it a bad death? It's like, how did it affect me? And how has it affected me now? Because every past life that you have affects you now at some time in your life. So that was why I wrote the book. It's like, well, this life affected me this way, and this is what I learned. This is what I brought back with me. And that's why I wrote the book, so people would realize it's like, you can go and find your life, but there's more than just finding your life and seeing who you were. Mm-hmm. It's finding out how did that affect me? How's that affecting me now? How can I correct that? Because if you don't correct it, it's going to continue to eat at you. It's like something's got, it's like almost like a mental illness. Like, oh my God, it's like, it's bothering me. It's bothering me. It's bothering me. Well, find out why it's bothering you, then get rid of it.
Well, that was my next question. Because in your opinion, why do past lives matter?
Because they matter so that you can correct you can't correct what happened before. But the feelings you had then should not carry over to this lifetime. And unfortunately, a lot of times they do, because it's like, say you're afraid of water. It's like, why are you afraid of water? Well, probably you drowned at some time. Okay, the way to get over that is go in that past life. Okay, this is what happened. I was like, but it's not going to happen anymore. So you can correct that so that you're not afraid of water anymore. It's a correction for yourself instead of having to go to a psychiatrist and pay big bucks. So it's much easier to do it yourself than to me, it's more fulfilling to be able to do it yourself.
Yeah, it is. And I think some people worry about doing it themselves because they think they're going to be biased about themselves. And if they see something they don't like, they're going to change it around and kind of sugarcoat it, And I think a lot of people do that. Even people that get readings, you don't want to read yourself because you think, oh, no, okay, that's not true. No, I'm just making that up, and you whitewash. Yeah. So that can be a problem for some people, but it's just go ahead.
If you allow yourself just to look at it as a third person, what I do when I go into a past life, take that little rabbit hole journey, is I do it as if I'm watching a TV program. Okay, This is what I'm seeing. Okay, I'm just doing it unbiased. It's like, this is a TV. This is what I'm writing down. This is what I'm feeling. And if you do that as a third person, it's like, it's not you. Just as, what is that person doing and why? It works a whole lot better.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many different layers to this, and it's really, really interesting as you get down into it. So were you able to read others first, or did you read yourself first and then found the ability to read other people?
I was able to read myself first, but then I found lots of times it's like, because I read Gypsy and Tarot also, and lots of times, I'll hold people's hands when I'm getting ready to read the cards. And I found that lots of times if I held their hands, I could see who they were before. Like, wait a minute. Is this something else I want to do?
That's the thing,
it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah, well, a couple of things jumped out at me in the book, and one of them was the introduction, where you say that when you touch someone and reveal to them who they were in a past life, that you share that moment with them, and that becomes part of you as well. So this is kind of a two-part question. Do you always need to touch someone in order to hone in on their past lives? And the other part of the question is it like you actually are there as far as whatever scene you're seeing, and you're just like an invisible bystander?
If they're with me and I touch them, it's almost like I go with them. It's like I'm standing beside them, so I actually go with them. So it's to me, it's fun because I get to go on another journey. It's not my journey, but it becomes my journey because I've gone with them. So when they come back, I can explain it more to them. I do not have to touch them physically, but for me, it works better.
Yeah, because a lot of people, will say that, they need to touch, or they can do it remotely or something like that. And everybody has their own way of doing it, I think. And we're going to talk down the line about your guided meditation so everybody can kind of figure out how they can start to do it. But do you get emotionally involved in what you see when you're on their journeys?
I do not, because they get emotionally involved, but I try not to get emotionally involved because they have to have somebody to bring them back. They have to have somebody to ground them. So I'm sort of like the grounding mechanism to bring them back to this particular time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk about your past lives, because that makes up a big share of the book, and absolutely amazing. But when was your earliest past life, and when was the most recent?
The first one that I did?
No, the farthest your past life, the farthest back, like were you in Egypt or were you in Babylon or whatever, like an era, like a time frame.
I call it Atlantis, but they did not call it Atlantis. I call it Atlantis only because that's a word that people understand, but it was actually before Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that one. I also have an Egyptian, but it was when Egypt still had grass. I was like way back there.
Way far back, yeah. That's funny. And the most recent one was how short or long time ago?
The most recent one was World War II.
Okay, that's not that far back.
No.
Not that far back at all. I think that more people should get interested in past lives, as you said, because it makes a great difference in what we do now. And as we said, people don't necessarily realize that. Like you said, the phobias, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, you can't remember why you don't like a snake.
Right.
Or and it's not just something you don't like, it's probably something that's fearful, phobic, really bad. Do you think that always ties into a past life?
I think most times it does, yes.
Mm. So because there are people that certainly forget things that happened in their earlier years. And so they might just think, well, I'm afraid of that because, when I was 2 years old, a spider bit me or, something like that.
Right.
And
lots of times that's very possible, but then sometimes it's like you find out about your past lives, not only to see why is it affecting you, but to me it makes history more real. It's like you read about history, but if you could take your little journey, it's like put yourself in that historical moment. It's like it doesn't have to be a real, I have one where I was in Massachusetts. Okay. Was I in Boston? Probably not. But I was in Massachusetts, so that makes that period more real to me. So if you could go to some place, that interests you, it's like, oh, that's why that interests me. And lots of times it's, what is your interest? Why are you so fascinated with a time period? Probably because you were there. So if you can take that journey and find, oh, this is where I'm at and this is why I'm here, it's like that makes that time period more real for you.
Yeah, it would. If people start thinking about their past lives, I've asked people, and I've done this to myself, I think I know some of them. And it's not that I took myself there. It's more like a familiarity with the age of it, the era, the nationality or something, where you're really drawn to certain things, and that, I haven't done mine. I don't know for sure, but from in my head, I just kind of know. I'll look at something and like you said before, you would go to various countries and you would feel at home.
Yeah.
And I do this a lot, if I see something, and there are times, and this may sound silly to some people that are listening, but you have to kind of have it happen. There are some places that maybe I see on TV, on a travelogue, on, some National Geo thing, and I will look at that, and I will just get tears in my eyes. And it's just a TV program. They're just showing, what's going on in that, that area. And I just feel like I'm not home. That was home, and I'm not there anymore. And
yeah, it's the familiarity.
Yeah, and it's really hard to explain that to people sometimes, because I'm going to take a poll in the chat room, just, and it'll take 30 seconds for them to answer. But any of you guys, do you ever have that experience that you look at a place, or you hear of a place, or you hear a different language or music of a different culture? Has that happened to you, that you felt that that was part of you at one time. And if you have, you can tell us what it was or where it was, and it would be interesting, if you could find out. Now, Tazwiz says that has happened to her, and I'm thinking maybe, one or two. Okay, Sherry knows. Sherry has seen her lives, she said. MJ said the first time he flew into England, he felt as though he was coming home.
Mm-hmm.
So, see, this is something very common, but I don't think everybody thinks about that too much. You just, kind of blow it off. Your mind is somewhere else. But sometimes it can be very, very heartwarming and very heart-tugging when you find this out. And also people that you meet. Let's talk about that, because there are people that we meet in life, and we have an immediate attraction to them. There are people
or
that
dislike.
Yeah, a very strong dislike sometimes. And you can't, sorry, I'm coughing. But you can't always say that it might be in your intuition or you're good at reading people. That might be part of it. But I think the other part is you've done that dance before somewhere.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. I mean, this could have been your arch enemy. This could have been your best friend. This could have been a lot of things. So,
I can tell you right now that my good friend that's sitting across the table from me right now actually killed me in a past life. But I've already forgiven her, so
Well, that's good, because she's still around. That's a very good thing. Okay, Kat said in chat. She says she did a guided past life regression once, opened the virtual door, and there was just a void. Maybe, so that brings the question for me, is there sometimes when we do a guided visualization or try to go back and we just see a void, is that possibly because we're not supposed to see that now?
Lots of times it's because you're between worlds. I mean, you could be in the higher element at the time, and you're not ready to see the truth. So they'll take you to what they call a void. It's like, to me, it's like stars. It's like, well, okay, you're not ready for this one yet, so we'll just send you over here until you are ready. And it's like it's like being in spirit form. And if you actually look around, you could probably see some familiar faces, because that's actually where you're at.
Yeah, and she just said maybe it's something that she didn't want to remember, something that was that bad. And I'm going to get into that a little bit further, too, in a minute. But I think, at certain times where the universe takes over, and there's only certain things that we can see for whatever reason. And it's not always by choice. It's by their choice, and they know best. I'm not going to argue with that. But it's got to be really kind of amazing to have that void. I mean, that was like, ooh. And then, okay, there's another question, is seeing these lives and going back, is that similar to deja vu?
Deja vu is actually part of it. If you've had deja vu, even though it seems like it's deja vu of this life, it's usually deja vu because it's very similar to something you did in a past life.
So it's kind of almost like muscle memory, something you did before in a different body or a different thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. Okay, we have a question. Kathy says, I've always wondered if in doing a past life regression, could you be picking up on someone else's life and thinking it's yours?
No, because when I do it on myself, it's like I'm alone, totally in the house. I will not pick up anybody else's.
Okay.
So if you do like the guided meditation, which I have in the back of my book, that's also on YouTube. It is YouTube, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's YouTube. That it will take you and plop you down in your own self, not anybody else's. Because it takes you down what I call the rabbit hole. And it takes you down there for you, yourself, and you're opening your own lives. You're not opening up anybody else's.
Okay, when you open your own life, do you get a feeling of familiarity as opposed to if you're reading somebody else's life, it's different? right?
Yes, much different.
Okay, because that makes sense. Let me see. I thought I saw something. Okay, one more question. Tabby, what do you think of the idea that our past life experiences are actually memories from blood relatives, since we are what we inherit, like heart disease or cancer? So why not brain cell memory?
Because your spirit is your brain, so your spirit is your own spirit, and to me, your spirit is the memory. Yes, you have the brain that works for you, but lots of times, if you watch any of these ghost shows, Ghost Hunters, all those other ones, it's like the ghosts, the spirits have their own memory. So if the spirits have their own memory, it's like you have a physical body, a mechanical body that's helping you remember. But once you're gone, that spirit still remembers. So the spirit is carrying forward all the memories with it.
Yeah, so that's what people wonder if, and I've read this too, that you are the same person each time you come back, in the sense of you're the same spirit. You're not the same
Right.
person. You may not be the same sex. You may not be the same nationality, religion, or whatever, but that DNA travels with you from life to life.
Yeah, the soul is the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what you learn in this lifetime.
Yeah, and well, learning in this lifetime, I mean, you could have been the worst SOB in a past life, and you will continue to be that in new lives until you do learn that lesson, and then
Yes.
your personality will change.
Yes, and that's what people have to remember also, is that even in my book, it's like so far I've only gone through the good ones. It's like I know there's bad ones out there that I need to pursue. As much as I don't want to, it's like I have to pursue them and see what they're about.
Yeah, I mean, another question. What about, could there be parallel lifetimes at the same time?
I believe that there are, because there's more than one dimension.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I believe there is, because your soul can split and go into a different dimension. It's like a different dimension, different time periods.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, I've done shows with people that talk about multidimensional lives and stuff, and similarities, and that's a really fascinating subject, and it doesn't seem as impossible as some people might think at the beginning. Because we are dimensional beings, basically,
Yeah.
and we can travel here and there, and I think we all think about ourselves in the physical body and our limitations in this body, because we're not over there, and we don't realize that we can do all kinds of wonderful things, when we are.
Well, it's just like when you go to sleep, when you're dreaming, it's like you're not in your physical body when you're dreaming.
That's true. And astral projection or astral travel and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just, oh God, I got a
That can be exhausting too.
Yeah. I mean, there's there's just so many. That's what kind of gets me about people that are very, very black and white. They don't understand that they're that gray area. There's so many possibilities in that gray area, and people are probably sick of hearing me say that. But they're
It's
going to
because
have
you're
to.
afraid of it.
Well, yeah, that's true, and it's the fear that keeps us going. But all right, now we also hear, depending on the source, that we have not just a handful of lives. Like we may have thousands of lives. I'm not so sure about thousands of lives, but we do have more than a few, right?
Well, we do have more than a few. I believe there are, unless you're a new soul. A new soul, could have just popped in all of a sudden. This is their first one. I've met a few new souls, and they're like, woohoo! Well,
all right. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll forget if I don't say this. So where do new souls come from?
well, they come from spirit. They come from souls. Like souls multiply also. It's not, you figure like if this earth started off with just the number of souls that the earth started off with, It's like, where did all these people get souls? They had to multiply the souls in order to fill all these people that are out here. So the souls have to keep multiplying in order to fill the bodies.
See, I've never thought of that in that respect. I haven't thought of souls multiplying like that, or reproducing, or whatever you want to call it, duplicating.
And my mind wanders in mysterious ways.
Well, no, it's a good question, but so those of us that have had more than one life and our DNA follows us, we're good. We kind of know who we are and what we do, and we know that every time we go back that we have that lesson to remind us what we need to work on and all that. But how does this could be a very rhetorical question. How does a new soul develop a personality?
By the first time he is born. Well, he's born, a new soul is born from two souls. So he actually picks up a little bit from those two souls, whoever they may be, and brings it with him. And that the first lifetime is what he sort of like anchors him in, like, okay, this is who you are. So to me, it's like, the first time a soul pops in as a new soul, his first lifetime sort of makes him who he's going to be from then on.
Okay, because MJ in chat said he would think a new soul would be shallow, where is the experience? But now you've just explained it, because the new soul comes from a couple of old souls.
Right, they have to. It's like, where else are you going to get them?
That's what I was wondering.
Eggs.
Well, I couldn't, like I said, I never gave that any thought. So, all of a sudden it's popping up in my head. And Cece in chat, she says, sorry, I can't help but thinking of Defending Your Life, the movie with Shirley MacLaine about past life pavilions, and wonder if there is a playback in our afterlife. Well, I think there is, isn't there?
Well,
don't we get a play?
It would have to be a playback, so he's like, okay,
this is what I didn't do right?
Yeah, so you know what to work on next time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see, Tazwiz, she said, someone told me that there are more souls than people. Is that true in your mind, in your opinion?
I think that there are, only because it's like some souls are going to be on the other side waiting for a while, because they're not going to keep popping back in every two, it's like, okay, I've been dead 2 years, it's like I'm going to pop back in. Sometimes souls need a rest. So there's got to be more souls available than there are actual bodies to pop in, because they need a rest. They can't do it continuously, just like we can't teach all the time because we get tired out.
And then the logic of it is they don't take up a whole lot of space like bodies do.
No, they do not.
So I think it's okay to have a lot more. I don't think they're in rubbing elbows back and forth. One more question, then we're going to take a break. This half hour went by quickly. Kat said, I had a dream. She said, one morning in it, it was nighttime, and I heard this huge whomp sound. Thought I'd awakened, and I was in a void, just nothing there. She said, it scared the hell out of me. And then actually I did wake up in broad daylight. What was that? Part of the separating body from dreams?
That sounds more like an astral travel, because the whop would have been her coming back to her body, and she just came back wrong.
And then did in the void. That would scare you. I mean, yeah. So I wonder how long it took to wake up and actually be in broad daylight and say, thank God, or whoever.
I don't know if you've ever astral traveled and came back and it's like, and you jerk awake. To me, that's landing wrong.
Yeah, I didn't consciously know that I was astral traveling, but I have jerked awake, so I'm assuming that's what it was. And yeah, I mean, that'll get you going. That'll open your eyes for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of amazing, the way things work around things that we don't think about, and then you'll experience something and not know what the heck it is. But yeah, it is kind of scary.
That's when you go to the bookstore and start looking up, okay, I had this experience. What was that?
Yeah. And hopefully you get the right books rather than people that just write because they think they can. Yeah. But that's a whole nother show. All right, we're going to take a 2-minute break, so everybody stay put, and we'll we'll be back with Della, and we'll be talking about her past lives.
Don't go away. There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages.
Are you haunted by shadow people in the middle of the night?
Do you secretly love all things creepy and spooky, enjoying ghost stories and horror fiction from the best storytellers?
Do you have a true ghost experience you want to share, but no one will believe you?
If yes, listen to the professionals on What Are You Afraid of? Horror Paranormal Show Friday nights at 9 p.m. on Para X Radio and at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com.
What are you afraid of on Para X?
Our creepy and demented hosts are on call to provide you with all your spooky needs with true ghost stories, interviews, indie music, and new horror fiction. We are ready to scare you.
Para X. From Haunted Road Media comes an exciting new novel by author Marla Brooks. Soul Connection, a deadly obsession. Two lost souls ripped apart by murder in another century find each other again in the present, only to discover that the murderer has followed them through time. Can their love save them, or will history repeat itself? Find out in this captivating new novel by Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, a deadly obsession. Available now on Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com.
Demons, vampires, werewolves, skinwalkers, all of this and more, Sunday nights at midnight on the Staring Into the Abyss radio show. Come, get lost with us.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Okay, welcome back. My guest is Della Williamson, and we're talking about past lives and her book, My Life As. And we're also delving into past lives in general. And at the end of the hour, we're going to be talking and giving information out about her guided meditation, so you can do it yourself or read it yourself or do it on YouTube. But I want to talk about Della, some of Della's lives, because they're so diverse. Some are long, some are short. You've been both genders. You've been different nationalities. How many did you write about in the book, Della?
9. Well, I wrote 10, I call them short stories, but the first one was actually This Life, a little piece of This Life.
Yeah.
And then there's 9 past lives.
All right. So let's talk about some of them. When you were doing it and trying to find your past lives, did you kind of guide yourself in any direction, or were these the ones that just jumped out at you? How did that work?
Well, the first one I wrote about was the Mary Leonard. That was the first one I wrote, because that was the one that Scott Orwell first took me down, and I met myself. And it's like, ooh, this is really interesting. We're going to have to get deeper into this one. And the deeper I got into it, it's like everything I was remembering is like, boy, those places really do exist in England. So,
that's surprising. Well, tell us a little bit about her.
Mary Leonard was English. Her father was Belgian. Her mother was Belgian, and they had been in World War I and had gone to England to live, and had taken up the name Leonard because I don't know why they took it up, but they decided to take up the last name of Leonard. So her name is Mary Leonard, and she had was a taxi dancer. A lot of people nowadays don't know what a taxi dancer is.
No.
A taxi dancer in World War II was a girl that would take a dime a dance and dance with a guy. And that's all they did. They just go and they dance with the guy for a dime, and then they go and do whatever else. It's like she was a taxi dancer, but she also was a ballerina. She was learning to ballet at this. I can't remember the name of the school right offhand, but the school actually does still exist in England. And it's a very prominent ballet school. So she was learning to be a ballerina and doing taxi dancing on the side to help pay for it. And I actually remembered some of the friends that she had, and it's like, oh, that's a relative in this life. Oh, wait a minute. So, and totally different gender too. So I was like, oh, that was very interesting. But she wound up, unfortunately, her first show that she did was Swan Lake, and she was one of the 4 girls that was in the back of the, I don't know if anybody's ever seen Swan Lake, but with the 4 girls that start in the back, and they come up, and then Swan Lake starts. Mm-hmm. Well, just as they came up with their first, whatever they call it, the first ballet move, it's like all the lights went out because they had been bombed. And she had been taken out by Blitzkrieg in London. And she died there on stage. And that was the first one I remember. It's like, okay, I think I need to write this one down.
Yes. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, I like Issy, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Oh, Issy.
Yeah.
Issy was the one from Egypt.
Yes.
Yes, Egypt. She was learning to be. Wait a minute. Got a term. Oops. Nope.
Learning to be what?
I'm trying to find my page here.
I know. I do this too. Not be mean.
She's learning to be a priestess. So she was a priestess. Learning to be a priestess for Isis, and not the Isis that we know nowadays. Isis was actually a goddess in Egypt, and Isis was sort of like a mother figure, and she was for birthing and protecting women, and she was learning to be a priestess for Isis, and she had been sold to the priestess, I call it the priestesshood, by her parents as payment for prayers answered, which I guess was very common back then. And this was the Egypt that actually still had grass. So that's what I thought was kind of interesting, because, we're in Egypt. It's like, we got grass. Oh, wow. So it was really interesting. But I remembered actually, it really seems weird, but the more I delved into that particular, I call her character, that part of me, I actually have met 5 other women that were there with me.
Wow.
And each one of them was like, do you remember? Yeah, I do. He's like, oh, wow. I was like, yeah, did you remember her? Oh, yeah. It's like, it was really interesting. It's like, wow. So it was quite interesting to go down and find out what she was doing, because, how she would clean up the offerings and go out and try to get offerings, and just walk the streets. And she'd walk the streets and say prayers for people, and she was quite happy doing that. It's like everybody was treated the same, and everybody was treated fairly. Mm-hmm. And she didn't see anything wrong with how she lived. And everybody says, oh, they mistreat you. It's like, how can they mistreat me? They care for me and they feed me. And she didn't understand, it's like, what all the meanness and the cruelty was in the world, because she had never seen it, had never experienced it. And then for one day, for all of it to just all of a sudden break into their rooms and destroy them, it's like she had no idea what was going on. And it's like she said, all she, in my mind, is like all she could do was pray for the other people, because she knew where she was going. She didn't know where they were going, but she knew where she was going. So, she was upset to die, but she's like, she wasn't too upset to die, because she knew where she was going, because she'd already prayed for it.
See, and old, wise beyond her years.
Yeah, she was, and that was actually the one where my girlfriend killed me. It's like,
Like I said, she's not like in my book that I wrote on reincarnation. You're back together, but yeah, that bad part is already, you left it back there.
You learned that you have you go to me, you go to the past lives. It's like, and it's not just for you, but it's so that you can forgive other people also. Because I had a boss that was a tormentor of mine in a past life, and he tormented me in this life too. So
sometimes you just can't get rid of people.
No matter how much you forgive them.
Patty in chat wants to know why she killed you.
Why did she kill me?
Mm-hmm.
Because she was a guard for the bad guys, and I call them the bad guys. You have to read the book to see who the bad guys were.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a guard for the bad guys, and the bad guy says, you need to kill all these girls. And, they had no choice. It's like they were slaves, mm-hmm. and they had to do what they were told. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I didn't blame her because, she was a slave. She couldn't do anything else except what she was told.
Other she would have joined you otherwise. They would have killed her first, yeah. And speaking of slaves, this past life of yours really touched my heart. P.
Oh, P. Yes, I love P.
Yeah, tell her story. I mean, this was very poignant at the end.
Well, P was a very young black girl who lived on a plantation, and again, she died very young. But that wasn't the story. The story was it's like she was P, and it's like she couldn't understand. Everybody had different names, P, S, T, U, V, and she said, finally asked her older brother, it's like, why was she P? And it was explained to her that the master of the house, the man in the big house, they call him the man in the big house, had all of these books, and she didn't understand what a book was. So the brother explained that it's like in the books where these looked like letters, and the letters made sentences, and they made stories. And she says, well, what's a letter? So the brother had found out what the letters looked like, and he wrote down letters for all the people, because everybody was named a letter. It's like she was P, her brother was E. So everybody, because the guy was so fascinated with reading, it's like instead of trying to name everybody, he just named them by the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, and she happened to be P. Mm-hmm. And her brother showed her what a book looked like by taking leaves, putting pictures on the leaves, then taking a vine and putting the leaves together, and says, this is what a book looks like. But they had to hide it from everybody because nobody could know that they knew what their names looked like.
Right.
It's like, nobody could know that they could read. So, they never got that far, but just to know a little bit was like, oh, no, you can't know anything. You have to be ignorant. Mm-hmm. You only know what I say you can know. So and she never understood why she couldn't know anything.
Mm-hmm. And her life wasn't that bad. I mean, it was a short one, but I think what got me is that she enjoyed her life as it was, and something that she was doing led to her demise, her ultimate demise, but she enjoyed doing it, and I think what kind of bothered me the most, and I could see it happening, we'll go ahead and we'll say that she was riding a mule.
She was riding a mule.
Mm-hmm.
They had three, because the kids were small back then, and the mules were very large. And it was a retired mule because it was a mule that couldn't work the cotton fields anymore, but he's still useful. So the man in the big house had given this big mule, who was retired, to the kids to use so that they could use him on the little garden. Well, he called it a garden. It's more like a large farm for us, but they used the farm stuff to feed the slaves. So the kids were riding the mule from the river one day, and there's three little ones on top of the mule, and she was on the rump. And she liked riding on the rump because it, went up and down, and it was fun to ride, and it was bouncy. And the mule spooked and threw her off and landed on top of her. And it took her a couple of days to die. And, in the meantime, she couldn't breathe, she couldn't move, and she didn't understand why the man in the big house came out and said, just let it die. And she was screaming at the top of her lungs, but she couldn't speak. Says, I'm not an it, I'm P. And she couldn't understand why he didn't know what her name was, because, she belonged to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if we have time, we'll talk about a couple of the other lives, because I like the some of the other ones too. But in each instance, you recall your death. But it seems that no matter how you passed, you seem to have passed without kicking and screaming and panic. It like as if at the very end in all those passings, and some were brutal, you just kind of peacefully let yourself go. Do you feel that at the very last minute we all just finally realize it's time and then just let it go? Or I don't know. I just kept thinking, well, gosh, if that was me and I had that in my past life, it was horrible. I think I'd fight or whatever, but they were...
I may have. I just haven't let myself go there yet.
Well, what you wrote about the ones you wrote, they're fairly peaceful. And maybe
a couple of them were actually choice, allow myself to die rather than have to feel the pain anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think living people do that too when they get to a certain point, but, or they just, can't stand, poor people with different problems and stuff. They just can't deal with it. But it just, as I'm reading this, I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this wasn't good. This wasn't, especially, Mary Leonard, and somebody in chat said the same thing. She took all those lessons for nothing, to then get, the bombs dropped, and that was the end of it. They say life isn't fair, but it's just kind of amazing the way that you wrote this, and maybe you're right.
I think that's why I came back so fast, because it was cut short by somebody else.
Uh-huh.
It was not, it didn't go. It didn't go like I had planned, because every soul comes in with a plan. Right. So it didn't go as planned. So my life was cut short too soon, and it wasn't cut short by me. Mm-hmm. That's why I came back so fast. It's like I think that somebody that's been murdered or been in bombing situations, something, or war, something like that. Mm-hmm. I think they come back sooner because they weren't able to finish.
Yes, unfinished business, exactly. Yeah. Well, also at the end of each chapter, you talk about the lessons that you learned from each life. So, that was kind of interesting that you can come to grips with what you see, and you're probably right. You're going by your gut feelings. This is what I learned. This is what I shouldn't have done. It's really good. Do you think that, or do you believe that we all choose our lives and situations before we come back into our next life?
I think we choose our lives, and we choose the major situations. There's always going to be minor situations and the things that we cannot control. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be a doctor. Yeah, you choose that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to come back and I'm going to be homeless. You don't choose that.
No, but it happens anyway sometimes. So yeah,
things happen. It's like, so you come back, and if you come back and do not finish, to me, if you come back and you do not finish or even get close to what you had planned to do, you come back with a new plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that makes sense, and ultimately, we maybe sometimes get it right. Hopefully we do.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. Eons, but time is different on the other side, so it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't seem so long. Do you ever take yourself back into your various lives to kind of relive certain situations for perhaps a closer look, or to get a different perspective on what you saw the first time you were there?
I actually did, because this is actually the book that I have now is actually a rewrite of the original book, because once I started looking at the book and reading the stories, it's like there's something missing. What did I miss? So I actually went back into each life. It's like, what did I miss? So the book has actually been, each story has actually been expounded on from the original book, because to me there was something missing. It didn't make quite sense enough. Does that make,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And I think it's good because, sometimes it's like you're watching a movie, right? And you really liked that movie. And then you see it on TV again, or, when it comes back or on demand or whatever. And when you watch it the next time, you see things that you overlooked the first time. Because,
yeah. I can watch Star Wars every single day and find something different in it.
Yeah, well, that's a very busy movie. Yeah, absolutely, or series, rather. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And so you can consciously take yourself back to your past lives that you know of. Now, suppose you wanted to look at another one. How do you go about that? You don't know where you're going. You don't know what it is, but you want to, do the guided meditation, right?
That's why I go down the guided meditation. It's like I pick a different door.
And your mind doesn't kind of get in the way? Because I would be thinking I'd be looking at a different door, and then I'd say, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just imagining this. Maybe I'm just going back to this. I would overthink it, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
You have to relax and open your mind and just let your mind take you there. You don't take your mind. You let your mind take you there, because your soul is going to go to what you need to see.
Mm-hmm. And you just have to be open enough to allow that to happen. Yeah.
Because if you go down what I call the rabbit hole, it's like, every door is different. Okay, which door interests you today?
And so there may be every time you go, there may be different doors that you haven't seen before, and those would probably be the ones that attract you.
Right.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and let's tell them where they can get this, and then we'll go back to, I think we have another life or two we can talk about. But there's a chapter at the end of the book called It's Your Turn, and that is the guided meditation. And there's two ways. I mean, now I could read that, but I would get distracted. I would have to, and there's a YouTube channel that people can go and listen to it and hear it,
right,
as opposed to reading. Because I always thought it's great when people give you guided meditations, but I think reading it makes it much more difficult than listening to it. I mean that
Yeah.
So
Edith is going to put the YouTube connection on my Facebook page.
Okay.
So it can be picked up that way, because it's on your YouTube channel, right? Mm-hmm. It's on Edith Mary Stanley's YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
It's where you can get the my guided meditation, because I don't have a YouTube channel myself, so I use Edith's because we're business partners.
I'm going to, let me see if I can get it real quick. I'm going to say it. So people, if anybody writes it down or they listen to this podcast, they can replay it again. But it's HTTPS : 2// and then it's YouTube, but it's YOUTU and then a dot and then the BE. I have that on mine too. It makes me crazy. / and then it's capital D, small d, capital N, small KS, F, J?
It looks like a J.
Yeah, FJR, and then 3, capital V, W. So, if anybody wants that, just get me on Facebook and I'll type it out there too. But just in case, people should get there, because I think it's really a good thing to do. I mean, guided meditations are for everything. I mean, you can do lots and lots of things with them, and very important things. And sometimes it's just fun. You can find out who your animal guides are. You can do, yeah.
The reason I wrote the guided meditation is so people could be able to read it and know that there's nothing to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people is like, oh, I'm going to go guided meditation. I don't know about that. That could be scary. I might not come back. So I wrote it out so people would see it's like, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. It's good discipline for us to be able to do that too, to pay attention to the guided meditations and allow our mind to do that without being distracted. It's really good exercise in not futility, but just in the opposite, in being able to control your mind enough to get things like that done. Without,
just don't look too good. Don't look too hard at the YouTube picture of me, because that's a terrible picture. It's like
We all say that. We do. I mean, I wish I could see you now because, and I'm just going to tell them that I love your blue hair. It's beautiful. It's a perfect color blue. And Mary's is pink. I know this from the last time.
Yeah.
So I got lucky. I get to see this stuff, but it's really fun. Now, you have a couple other lives that probably now we can't get into, but just teasing people. He who speaks to the eagles, the Spaniard, Uriah. There's so many. You want to meet these people when you read the book. I mean, it's really, really good. Sorry. So, what in the last couple of minutes we have, I want you to tell everybody where they can find you, your services, if they can come to you to get readings and all that, and also about your show with Edith Mary Stanley.
Oh, our show with Edith Mary Stanley. That's our podcast that we do on Wednesday nights at 7:30 through Edith Mary Stanley's Facebook page, because we share her Facebook page because I'm technologically challenged. Sorry, I just am. But nope. I live in Universal City, Texas, that is just north of San Antonio, and you can contact me via my Facebook page / messenger at Della Williamson. That's all it is, just Della Williamson. And you pull me up, I got the blue hair, you know it's me. Contact me, and it's like, if have any questions, want to come see me in the Universal City, it's like, I have a telephone. My telephone is 210-381-2926. And just be aware that if I don't know the number, it goes to voicemail. So just leave a message and I'll get back with you.
Smart woman, very smart woman, because you never know who's on the other end. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I really do. As with Edith, I mean, both of you have to come back at some time because we have a lot of good stuff to talk about. And the podcast will be up tomorrow, and I'll fill you in. And when we go off the air, I'll tell you where everything's going. So sit tight.
Okay.
And thank you all for listening in. And until next time, everybody, blessed be.
Thanks for having me.
And merry meet again. Good night.
Good night.
Unbroken, may the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again. Merry meet again. Merry meet again.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited.